Now call this regular workshop meeting of Jacksonville City Council to order. We have a proposed agenda for tonight's meeting, and I would entertain a motion to adopt that agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Next, we have the minutes from the February 22nd, 2022 regular meeting, and 7 consent items. A motion to include both. Anybody?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion, I got a motion and a second down here. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. So we have 3 workshop topics for tonight. The first one would be agenda number 8 on the proposed agenda for the adopted agenda for tonight is transit. So Dr. Woodruff will present this item.
Mayor, members of the council, good evening. I'd like to ask, if you don't mind, Mr. Sosa is on his way from a meeting in Raleigh, and for transit, we believe it's important for all 7 of the elected officials to be here. Would you have any objections if we move to recycling?
Council, you all right with moving 8 to the back of the?
Yes.
Okay. We'll move it to be the last item tonight.
So take a moment just to recognize we have many of the people who currently are part of the operations of First Transit who are with us tonight. We welcome them, glad to see them. So regarding recycling, as we go into the FY23 budget, we're trying to nail down and have your concurrence on as many issues as we possibly can. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to ask you to give us what I'm going to call a consensus vote on what you want to do relative to recycling. Or if you decide you would like to postpone this to the next meeting, you certainly can do that. A little history. For more than a decade, we had a contract with Sunoco, and as you'll recall, the city cost was 0. We simply picked it up. That was certainly an expense, but we were able to deliver it to the recycling center, and at that time, it was processed. Mayor, I'm going to do what my granddaughter does. I'm going to erase all of this. In courtesy to the folks who are here tonight with First Transit, I think it would be more appropriate, now that Mr. Sosa has arrived, for us to reverse what I ask you to do and to allow us to do transit. So would that be acceptable to you?
Would be acceptable? Yes.
Okay. With that, I'll ask the media folks, and I'm going to ask Anthony to come up. So please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here again to talk about transit. Before we get into a follow-up on some of the points that we talked about last time in February, I want to just go over really quickly how we divvy up some of the responsibilities with the day-to-day operations of the system. Because based upon some of the conversation that we had and some of the conversation amongst the staff afterward, I want to make sure that's clear before we hopefully make some decisions this evening. So with regard to the day-to-day responsibilities, the city is responsible for federal compliance. And that's making sure that we follow all the rules to be eligible for the federal funds that operate the system, whether that be procurement requirements or whether it be grant management, a number of different things. There's a whole lot of compliance that's involved. City also maintains all of our capital assets, whether that be buildings, bus shelters, or buses. We own all of our capital assets as well. So we do not lease or we do not contract for any of our capital assets. We conduct planning, and we also, as you recall, took over the call center this fiscal year because we're getting ready to move into Jacksonville Station. And we felt it was important that the face of that building be city employees. So we successfully took that on this fiscal year. From a contractor perspective, and we have some of our friends from First Transit here, they manage the day-to-day of the buses themselves. So making sure that they're on the road and they're on time. We also have another contractor, Onslow United Transit, which provides our ADA paratransit service. And they do that in a turnkey fashion. So they actually provide the vehicles, they provide the oversight, They provide the maintenance for those vehicles, et cetera. And that's for the type of transit that's required door to door for folks with disabilities. So just to review where we left off last time, we talked about 4 different options for moving forward in '23 with transit operations. One was to negotiate with First Transit and see if we could reduce the cost of the proposal that was submitted. 2 was to consider options for operating with city personnel. 3, we felt was an option that could be paired with either 1 or 2, and it's very likely that we will do that before the budget is finally adopted. We're not going to talk about that tonight, but that is something that we're looking at very closely. And number 4, while we didn't talk about it a whole lot last time, we really don't feel that this is a viable option, mainly because last year we transported almost 200,000 people. And so those are a lot of folks who use transit to be productive citizens in our community. But also the federal rules require, if we were to cut off transit service completely, then we would have to pay back the pro rata share of the capital interest that they have in all of our assets. And of course, that's a pretty sizable amount given that we've invested in Jacksonville Station, the park and ride, the bus fleet, et cetera. It's not something that's common, let's just say that. So some follow-up items here. We're going to talk a little bit about insurance. There were some questions about what is covered versus what is not covered by the city's insurance. Mr. Carter's going to talk about collective bargaining. We learned a lot over the past few weeks about collective bargaining. We're also going to take a look at FTA and state apportionments, basically see how much money is coming in versus how much money we're spending every year and what the trend line has been like over the past several years. And then we're also going to present to you a wage analysis for the city operation option. And what that's going to show you is basically our recommendation if we were to take it in-house and several scenarios that indicate the amount of tolerance between the cost that we feel that we can do it versus what the contracted or the contractor's proposed price is. So from an insurance perspective, we talked about it last time. It was unclear as to what was fully included in the city's insurance. We do insure the vehicles in addition to having the contractor insure them as well. That's mainly as a double protection, but it also covers us for when city employees drive the vehicles to Wilmington or to other places to have major service done. But the insurance, we did get clarification from the league that the $33,000 that you see there on the screen would cover bus liability as well as bus operations. Did I say that correctly? Is it close enough? From a workers' compensation standpoint, we did include some of this in our last proposal, but digging a little deeper into this with the league, we found that it was going to be a little bit more expensive. So the proposal that we have has been increased by about $22,000. Again, one of the driving factors behind the cost increase, and rightfully so based upon the information that First Transit has given us, is the insurance. I can't recall the exact amount that it's increased, but it's increased substantially over the past 3 years to the point where the proposal that we have for next fiscal year has a cost of $129,000 just for insurance alone. So the point there is, of course, that there's quite a gap between where we are from an insurance perspective versus where they have to be given their insurance carrier. All right, and this is where John takes over to talk about collective bargaining.
Mayor and council, thank you. Good evening. One slide, but a pretty lengthy legal monologue. Let me begin with a disclaimer. The first thing I'd like to say is that nothing I'm here to say tonight has any implications to whether unions are good or whether unions are bad. That is not the discussion that we're going to have here. We're going to talk about what the first 3 bullets up there cover, and that is what state law and what federal transit law say about unionization and about, again, the federal transit law, what it says about unionization. The second thing we're going to talk about is equity among city employees. And I'll tie all this together as I get down to that point. And then the last one is, why are we talking about all this? Well, one of the reasons we're talking about all this is we've only had one bidder, and you have bid this out twice this year and just one bidder. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. I like to build upon what we've done before with housing authorities and so forth, because we're going to talk about authorities in a moment. But the first statute you see up there is North Carolina General Statute 95-98. Well, that's not in the city book. The city book is 168. We've talked about that before. That is the chapter that covers cities. 95-98 is there because it comes out of the labor law. And this is the North Carolina labor law as far as unionization that not only applies to city municipal employees, but also applies to all employees. And I'm going to read pretty much from that statute. And I think you'll agree with me, this is pretty clear. Quote, any agreement or contract between the governing authority of any city, town, county, or other municipality, or between any agency of the state of North Carolina and any labor union as a bargaining agent for any public employees of such city, town, county, or other municipality or agency is hereby declared to be against the public policy of the state. These are important words. Illegal, unlawful, void, and no effect. City, state employees in the state of North Carolina are not allowed to unionize. That is against the law, as I have read that to you. But now let's move from what state law says, what 49 in the USC stands for, the United States Code, 5333B. This little paragraph I want to read from an article from the United States Department of Labor, and it talks about this particular section of the U.S. Code. And it says the following. When federal funds are used to acquire, improve, or operate a mass transit city, that is public transportation, federal law requires arrangements to protect the interests of mass transit employees. And they cite this 49 USC section 5333B. And this is part of the Urban Mass Transportation Act. This particular section specifies that these protective arrangements must provide for the preservation of rights and benefits of employees under existing collective bargaining agreements, the continuation of collective bargaining rights, the protection of individual employees against a worsening of their positions in relationship to their employment, assurances of employment to employees of acquired transit systems. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. Priority of reemployment and paid training programs, etc. So that's what this particular section says. Now, the federal law has said the Congress, when they passed this and other acts, never intended to establish a federal cause of action where unionized employees could sue the state of North Carolina or the city in this regard. They say the proper jurisdiction to seek any kind of judicial relief is for them to go to the particular state courts. And the case, again, a Supreme Court case, bore this out and said, quote, Congress made it absolutely clear that it did not intend to create a body of federal law applicable to labor relations between local government entities and transit workers. But it also says this, and I'm reading here from, again, a document sponsored by the Federal Transit Administration, and has this bottom paragraph. In other words, comma, the state is free to establish applicable labor laws, and Section 5333B does not override that state's authority. Nonetheless, if a state or its political subdivisions desire those funds, the state must satisfy Section 5333B requirements. As indicated by the court, a state is, however, free to prescribe whatever labor laws and policy it chooses and to forego federal funds. State law, I think you would agree with me, is a lot clearer than the federal law. But that last paragraph implies to me that if you want federal money, you've got to take certain actions to protect federal employees that are unionized. we've done a lot of research with Anthony, Richard, and Ron, and others on this particular topic. And one of the persons that we've talked to, and I talked to him 3 years ago when this contract came up, but his name is John Joy, and he's the Wilmington City Attorney. Mr. Joy was actually an assistant city attorney out of Charlotte before he became the city attorney in Wilmington. And as part of his responsibility, he oversaw the Charlotte transit system there. Transit systems, and let's talk in particular about Charlotte. The Charlotte transit system began with the utility, Duke Energy Company. Utility companies started the bus systems. They started them because they wanted to get their employees from point A to point B, maybe from homes to work, et cetera. When the utility company in Charlotte was, the transit system in Charlotte was taken over by the city, Duke Energy employees who were operating it were unionized. So they had to figure out how to do that in light of the state law, which says you cannot be unionized as city employees. And they did that under what is a different here, that's 160A-575. 160A pertains to municipalities, to cities. But this is entitled Public Transportation Authorities. And I'm going to go over that in a moment. But I think it's interesting to note, again, back to Mr. Joy, that in the city of Charlotte, when they brought it over, they established an authority. You're familiar with authorities, and WAS is an authority. The TDA is an authority. Housing authority. Remember, we went over that law and all the, it is a freestanding, if you will, and I use that term, it is a legal entity. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you they can be sued and sue, et cetera, and so forth. Now, in Charlotte, what happened is your bus system there is unionized and it's run by the authority. But you may be familiar that Charlotte has something new in the last decade or two, and that is light rail. Those employees are not part of that authority. They're city employees of the city of Charlotte. So again, and that's what I'm going to get to in a moment about equity, but you have city employees who are running the light rail system, and you have unionized authority employees that are running the bus system in the city of Charlotte. The city of Wilmington has a system that is city and county, New Hanover and Wilmington, and it is an authority, and it is unionized. And Anthony's more familiar with that system, and of course, Mr. Joy talked about that. So Charlotte and other cities in the state where unionization existed were able to operate under this 160A-575 et al. There's other sections here. It's called Article 25 of 160A, Public Transportation Authorities. And it sets out how you set up a public transportation authority, and these folks are not city employees. They work for the authority. They're not covered by 95-98. That's how they're unionized. This particular section says that a municipality may, by resolution or ordinance, create a transportation authority, and the authority is to be consist of no more or up to 11 members as determined by the governing body. The council would, of course, appoint those members, and they would, at that point in time, receive the federal funds, the state funds, and the city funds, and they would operate the bus system, theoretically. Now, it says, what are the powers of the authority? First one, to sue and be sued. They can employ persons. They can acquire and maintain lands, buildings, and buses. They can enter into contracts. They can operate a public transportation system, etc. Again, just like the authority that we talked about with the housing authority. All these things are delineated here in the statute. It says here, the establishment of, and this is from the statute 168-583, the establishment and operation of a transportation authority is herein authorized or governmental functions and constitute a public purpose. And the municipality is hereby authorized to appropriate funds to support the establishment and operation of the transit authority. From that angle. I want to now move over to equity. And I have a little personal knowledge about equity and unions and no unions, and that is, and I have my wife's permission to tell this, my wife was an employee for over 30 years of Carolina Telephone. At least that's what it was when she was hired. I think when she retired, it was Sprint or Embark are one of those names. It has changed names, as we all know. She worked in the commercial division. She was a service rep, and she actually ran at times a phone shop where you actually went in and you picked out what color phone you wanted to go on your wall, or if you wanted the Princess phone, or you wanted the box phone, and things a lot of young folks today would not even understand what they're all about. But it was, there was a life at one time. The commercial department of the phone company at that time, for those 30-plus years, was not unionized. But right down here where she worked on New Bridge Street, right beside her, and the folks that shared the same break room with her were plant workers who actually managed what is called the switching equipment, where phone calls were switched, et cetera. They were unionized. The gentlemen and ladies, if there were at that time, who drove the trucks and came to your home to figure out what was going wrong and why you weren't getting the calls or why the party line didn't work or whatever it may be. But again, they were unionized. So you had here a section of the company that was unionized and a section of the company that was not unionized. I can tell you during those 30 years, there was at least one trip we made to Newbern to figure out the unions wanted the commercial section to unionize. They wanted to do that. Again, there was always a feeling that somebody's getting a better deal, union or not union. And again, it comes back to classes of employees. The union employees were one class, the non-union employees were another class, and there was always feelings that somebody wasn't getting the same shake that the other fellow was getting as far as employment opportunities and benefits and so forth. Equity among city employees, when you have the system like you have in Charlotte, I would believe, again, you've got employees that are running the light rails that are city employees. And then you've got employees that are running the buses that are authority employees, but they all feel like that they work for the city in one way or the other. But again, there's those kind of issues. So why bring this up at all? Well, I always like to feel like I'm hopefully trying to educate. But there's also, we bring it up not because First Transit has any union and there's no plans, but certainly when MV operated, there was discussions about unionization. We bring it up to talk to you about because I think one of the considerations that you need to consider tonight, besides what all of us ever have said so far, is that having gone out twice, there's been only one bidder. There's only one company that's interested in operating the city of Jacksonville transit system. Now, Anthony's told you before, he felt like, and I'm sure he's right, that's because this is really a small operation compared to many of these companies that run systems in other places. But again, at this point in time, one of the considerations is, what about next time, 3 years from now, if there's no bidders? Or if there's a bidder that is unionized? Do you have to set up an authority to, accordingly, the section I read to you, you have to protect those folks, et cetera? You know, that's what has happened. Instead of entering into situations where folks are accused of union busting, they've actually set these authorities up in accordance with the state statute so as not to circumvent that. There's not any issue there. But again, you get into classes of employees. But this, again, is just one of several issues I think that y'all need to think about as you move forward. And usually the time to think about it and to make a decision is when you're not under the gun. You're not being forced to take it in. There's no bidders, et cetera. But again, I think you need to consider these points, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have from this particular slide. Sorry it was so long-winded.
Any questions?
Thank you. I'll be around.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. I think it's clear that we've been hanging out a lot together these days.
Now, Anthony, was that because his presentation took such a long time?
Because it was such a concise and thorough
Concise and thorough.
presentation. So, Mr. Carter talked about one bidder, and this is the first time that we've ever only had one bidder. But what I did want to do is take you through kind of the history progression here of what's happened over time when we put this project out or put the contract out for bid. So we started in '07. The next contract was in 11, then 16, then 19, then 22. You can see MV ended up with the first 3 of those contracts. And then we were here just a few years ago talking about First Transit, and we're here again tonight talking about First Transit. The cost of those contracts you can see on the right-hand side, and then on the far right, you can see what the percent change is between the first years of each of those contracts. And 11, 16, and 19, we had 2 bidders. One of those bidders was always Onslow United Transit. And while they put together a good proposal, they just were never found to be the lowest cost, most qualified bidder. And in 11 and 16, that was found to be MV Transportation, and then 19, it was found to be First Transit. And we've had a great experience with First Transit. The challenge that we have is when we put this out, excuse me, in 21 and 22, we had 6 at the pre-bid? 6 or 8 at the pre-bid. But when we got the bids back, we only received 1. So we put it back out on the street again, hoping to entice some additional competition. We actually called folks too and encouraged them to participate, and still only received 1 bid. So again, the concern here is not necessarily just the cost. The concern is also, getting a fair price through competitive award. And if you look at the percent change there on the side, and I'm not knocking First Transit by any stretch of the imagination, because they have been great to work with, but I'm not sure that the fair pricing, I'm not sure that there's enough competition in what we're doing in order to get a fair price. And that's just my opinion. Why is this important? This is important because of the way that we fund operations. Okay, we normally talk about capital like Jacksonville Station and Park and Ride and all of that, and all we have to do is contribute 10%. But with operations, we end up contributing 50%, 50% ends up coming from the Federal Transit Administration, 25 comes from the state, and then 25 comes from the city. However, there is only a limited amount of state funds to support the operation, okay, that are allocated to us. So once we exceed that 25% allocation, or the allocation from the state, then the operations ends up costing FTA 50% and the city 50%. And that's why you're seeing the even split in these previous slides that we've talked about before, where the total is $350,000 and then the city share of that is half. Looking at the FTA apportionment, we also have a cap there. Now, this does tend to move a lot more than the state money does. It's less volatile, and it's continuously moved up. So you can see what the apportionment is there in 19 through 23. You can also see in the middle what we've budgeted every year to support transit, and then what the balance ends up being of that annual appropriation once the budget is adopted. And from 2019 to 2023, you can see that we've seen a dwindling of that fund reserve, or that carryover amount that's been apportioned to us that we don't use every year. This is very important because the residual funds are what we use to accumulate over a period of years to go out and pay for bus replacement. Okay, so the closer that we get to the FTA apportionment every year, the fewer funds that we hold in reserve to then go back and replace vehicles. The 23 amount that you're seeing there includes the proposal that we received from First Transit, and that's why it's at 1.349. In 2020, you see a little bit of a spike there too. That's because we ended up buying some buses. So that's a little bit more than just the operating budget. Are there any questions about this? Okay, so we did go back and work with First Transit to sharpen the pencil. They were willing, excuse me, to reduce the total first-year cost by about $25,000. Over the life of the contract, it was going to end up adding to about $200,000, but that's over a period of 5 years. So with that revised proposal, the total increase from fiscal year 22 to 23 is about $346,000, and then the general fund is $173,000. You can see how that trends out over what we call the base period of the contract. If we were to sign it, they were to sign it, then it's guaranteed to be in place for 3 years. So are there any other questions about the revised proposal? Because we're going to shift gears just a little bit. So here, basically, we want to give you more information about the proposal that we have put together for in-house operation. And I know that we flashed some numbers on the screen last time, but there were some questions about, what does that actually include, and how confident are we in those numbers? So what we have here is what the city recommendation or the staff recommendation would be if we went in that direction. And that would be to match the base wage for the entry-level driver that First Transit has proposed at $16 an hour. We feel that that's market competitive, and it's within kind of the pay scale that we have for similar type of employees with the city. So the salary and benefits, it's a fully allocated cost are shown. Then we also have direct expenses like uniforms and CDL, licensing and things of that nature that are relatively constant to a total of $1.081 million. Compared to the revised proposal, it would create a savings of $164,000 total. If we were to increase this to $18, and again, what we're trying to do here is show a tolerance between what we're proposing and where we would actually exceed the cost of the proposed contract. If we were to increase it to $18,000, the savings would be around $66,000. And again, this is for the base rate employee. And if we were to increase it to $20 per hour, you can see that the cost benefit flips upside down, and we end up having a net cost instead of a net savings. So the good thing there is that we've done a lot of due diligence on the proposal. We feel very solid about it. And there is a significant amount of tolerance between where we are with the First Transit proposal versus where we feel like we would be with an in-house operation. Okay. Sir, would you like to take it from here? Sure.
I'm going to go back a couple of slides. Oops. That obviously was the wrong direction. Would media please put back up the $16 an hour slide? My wife doesn't let me use the remote control at the house either, so just for purposes. When Anthony talks about the $16 an hour, that is not a statement that says every employee is going to get paid $16 an hour. That is a scale where the lowest employee would be $16 an hour. And the numbers that you see not only include the wages, they include everything that we pay in benefits. So in addition to the $16 an hour, these employees would become part of the North Carolina retirement system. That's figured in. They would be eligible for health insurance. That's figured in. So when you look at the number at $16 an hour of $164,000, that includes, or that is the savings after all of the employee benefits and expenses are included. And I want to stress again, if you take it to $18 an hour, it includes all of that. But Mr. Thomas asked at the meeting, I believe 2 meetings ago, at what point does the formula go in the wrong direction? Well, you can decide, does it go in the wrong direction at $16 an hour, $18 an hour? But we can all agree it goes in the wrong direction at $20 an hour. But now remember, that's not $20 an hour for every employee. That's the minimum that any bus driver would receive. The proposal that we have from the staff is $16 an hour because that is what the First Transit proposal is also saying, is that if we sign a contract with them, they're going to move all of the drivers, and I think appropriately so, up to $16 an hour. Over the next several years, we're not sure what they would increase, but what we are showing you is 16, 18, and then 20. Some of the things from a management standpoint that concerns me is, first of all, just one bidder. This is not about has First Transit done a good job or a bad job. I can tell you, without being overly critical, that we were glad to move from MV. There were some issues, and we'll just leave it like that. First Transit's done a good job. The problem is we are a small transit system. We have 5 routes. 5 routes. You know, we are not Charlotte. We are not Wilmington. We operate this system only inside the city. The contractor currently makes all the financial decisions. That can be good, that can be bad. For example, the contractor can decide what they want to pay. They can also decide who they have insurance with. One of the financial decisions are partly yours, but once you sign a contract, that contract is the financial decisions. One of the nice things about First Transit, there's no operational change. 5 routes, all the current employees stay employees of First Transit. There's also shared responsibility because, as you've seen, from an insurance standpoint, whether you go with First Transit or not, the city does in fact cover all the buses and all of the employees. So if there's an accident out there, you have the city insurance through the North Carolina League of Municipalities, their RMS, risk management system, and then you also have the insurance company for First Transit. If unionized, and again, not speaking for or against, they are currently not unionized. They do have the right to unionize because they're not government workers. Remember what John said. If you're a government worker in North Carolina, at the state or local level, you cannot unionize. However, the transit employees could unionize today if they wanted to. If they unionize and at a later date, the city, for whatever reason, takes over the transit, those employees cannot become city employees. Why? Because the state law says what John said. What you'd have to do is set up the authority. And again, they would not be city employees. The other thing is the price. From a city operational standpoint, if we took it over, there would be modest operational changes. Now, what does that mean? We still have 5 routes. We still pick up the same. We go to the base. We're on the same schedule. The main difference is while the bus says Jacksonville, the ladies and gentlemen who drive the buses would then be city employees. So the operational change would be, from a supervisory standpoint, that instead of being supervised by First Transit, they would be supervised by your employees, primarily Anthony, Deanna, and then Roy. And then obviously the current supervisory staff that's in place with First Transit. The city would make all the financial decisions. Now, why is that important? Well, you're the ones who are responsible for how the tax money is spent. And if the system begins to get more and more expensive, then you have the ability to say, well, folks, we're not going to have 5 routes. We're going to only have 4. Or instead of charging this, we're going to charge that, which you have the right under either to decide on the rates. But the financial decisions would be totally yours. The other is the city does assume full responsibility, whereas right now it's shared. The other key point, not only is there currently no union, if you bring them in-house, you would be guaranteed that they would never be unionized. And again, that's not a statement pro or con regarding unionization. They would become city employees, and there would be a modest cost reduction. And I want to stress that. I don't believe that this is really about cost at this point. You saw a slide a while ago that had 4 options on it. We took the 4th one off because it really isn't an option. You know, because we have built Jacksonville Station and because we have put up all of the transit stops and we have buses, if you were to get out of the transit business, then you would have to pay back a very large check. I remember when we were talking about building Jacksonville Station, the city attorney, that's the handsome and talented John Carter, as in the gentleman here, he made the statement, and you can read it in the minutes, that if you build Jacksonville Station, you will forever be in the transit business. Why? Because once you've used that $9 million, the only way you get out of transit is to pay it back. And of course, you'd pay it back based upon depreciation. So 5 years from now, it'd be cheaper to get out of it than it would be today. 10 years from now, cheaper than 5 years from now. So your options really are to negotiate further with First Transit, which we don't believe is really going to be successful. They did come down $26,000, and that's $26,000 of what, 1.3 million? So we appreciate their consideration. The other is to operate with city personnel, and then the third is whichever you pick, one or two, and that's to modify service to reduce cost. I don't think now's the time to be modifying service. I'm going to give you a sidebar. I'm very fortunate to have an F-150 pickup truck that gets 22 miles a gallon. A little over a year ago, well, let me start that differently. I'm going to erase that. My wife doesn't like for me to drive on the bottom half of the tank. She likes me to drive on the top half. So about every Saturday or Sunday, I go fill the truck. You can relate to this. A year and a half ago, to put in 13 gallons of gas cost $26. This past Sunday, I put in 13 gallons and it cost me $49.86. Let me tell you what's happening in the city budget. As you know, by your policy, for more than 10 years, we have budgeted unleaded gas at $3.15 a gallon across all of our departments. $3.15. Yesterday, Ed ordered 12,000 gallons of unleaded. Mr. Thomas, you are quite aware that we don't pay taxes like you would pay at the pump, but would you like to guess what we had to pay instead of $3.15, higher or lower?
I was going to guess 315.
You would be wrong.
60.
Dr. Washington? Higher is correct.
Now, exactly how much higher are you going to ask me?
I'm going to keep going down the line here
Oh,
on this
ooh,
one.
oh, okay.
Mr. Bittner, it's higher, so how much higher?
10 cents.
That would be $3.25. You got the wrong button anywhere? Mr. Jackson?
Higher than that 316.
Mr. Sosa,
Right.
you had a trip today, and I bet you had to fill up. What would you guess?
Yesterday and today, about 3:30, or yeah, 3:30.
You say 375.
Right rules?
You're very close. Yesterday, for the first time in over 10 years, and remember, we don't pay taxes, $3.55. $3.55. Now, why do I bring that up in relation to transit? Well, it's part of the operating cost. It isn't part of First Transit. It doesn't relate to your decision tonight on whether you're going to put it in the city or whether you're not. The point I'm making is there are costs that we can control and there are costs that we can't control. From a city budget standpoint, not a transit standpoint, this really concerns me as your manager, that we're now paying $3.55 a gallon. And guess what? We're fortunate because as a non-city purchase, the price across the street this afternoon, Ron, was what?
419.
419. We don't know where that's going to go. Going back, though, to the operations, I'm going to give you some recommendations that I honestly did not believe I would give you. When we started this discussion a month or so ago, I was 180 degrees away from this. But as your manager, these are the recommendations I'm giving you. Because of the experience that we're having, I believe that it's in the city's long-term best interest to take this in-house. That we thank First Transit for their service, and that you authorize the city transportation HR department to immediately contact and recruit the people that are sitting in the back and their counterparts, and that we move this operation in-house as soon as possible, but certainly no later than July 1st, because that's when your contract. Let me talk about why. I go back to what John talked about, one bidder. I go back to control of your finances. I go back to all employees are city employees. And there's a fourth one I didn't put down. Only today can you be guaranteed that the employees of transit are not unionized. That is not a statement that says pro or con about unions, but it is the reality that as long as you have this operated by a private company, they have the right to unionize. Now, I will tell you, this is a tough recommendation. I can tell you, I believe you're going to have a difficult time with this decision as a council. This is probably, other than some things like, unimportant things like raising property taxes. By the way, that's supposed to be funny. This is probably one of the toughest decisions that you're going to have to make. If you're comfortable making that decision tonight, that's fine. We do need to have this decision made, if at all possible, on the 22nd of March, or at the very latest, your first meeting in April. We're certainly not going to push you, because this is a very, I hate to use the word drastic, it's a very unusual step that we are being faced with as an organization. Now, Mr. Carter, would you like to correct anything I've said? Yes. Okay. With that, what kind of discussion or questions can we answer for you?
Council open for discussion.
How many employees are we talking about hiring, possibly?
Anthony, would you step up? Why don't you come up here? I'm going to sit down a minute.
Dr. Washington, we would look to hire a total of 22 employees. No, ma'am. There would be a portion of them that are full-time, a portion that are part-time, and a portion of them that are part-time non-benefited. And I have the breakdown if you'd like to have that.
Please give
That's similar to the possibility, like around the holidays, when transit gets a little bit busy, you might have to hire seasonal workers, or?
Generally speaking, we would have these folks on board all the
Okay.
time. But the benefit of the 1,000-hour-a-year non-benefit employee is, of course, we don't have to pay benefits, and it's a good opportunity for a second part-time job.
Mr. Warden.
You had on the 16 and the 18, you had savings. Was that savings, how much of that would be split with FTA and how much with us? In other words, would FTA pick up? Is there, in other words, would the city would not accrue the full 126 or the 60? Go back to the $16 an hour slide. Is that, does that 164, is that accrue all to the city?
The 164, no, sir.
Right.
So it accrues 50% to the FTA and
Okay.
50% to the city of Jacksonville.
Okay.
And then the
So
same,
it's only, so it's, okay.
it's the same thing with the $18 an hour.
Okay.
So we are seeing a net increase regardless of which option we choose.
Other discussion?
I'll just reiterate what I said in the last time, that we've had experience bringing things in-house and projections didn't meet expectations. I mean, we have city employees. I mean, I understand that you can say we're starting at 16, but then when we do a wage adjustment for the city employees, these are city employees, so they'll accrue the same thing. It's definitely a double-edged sword, but, you know, here we're it's a tough decision. It's hard to know.
Even with pay increases would be covered halfway by the Fed, right?
Yes, sir, we're at a point where the 50/50 would be in place.
That's why I said earlier, it really isn't a financial decision per se now. It's really about the future. Mr. Thomas makes a good point. If you give a cost of living increase to your employees in the FY23 budget, this number changes if they're city employees. This number does not change if they are non-city employees and are the contractors' employees.
Mr. Mayor, I want to share one thing. I told you about the Charlotte and about Wilmington, and this is directly from Anthony. But the following are urban transit systems that are in-house: Salisbury, Fayetteville, Chapel Hill, and Greenville, North Carolina. The great bus system, if anyone wants to be there. But those 4 are listed from Anthony that are in-house with the particular cities.
And not to belabor or advocate, but one of the things that Mr. Joy advised us is that we're in a very unique situation because we're not inheriting what's considered a legacy transit system, meaning we haven't had a transit system that was started by a utility company and then inherited by the city. So we're in a unique position to not have to work with labor unions as an urbanized system.
Any other discussion? Does anybody want to make a motion at this point as to which option you want to follow,
Or do you
Make a
want to?
motion that we accept the manager's recommendations as set forth in the presentation.
is there a second? Second, any further discussion on that?
Is that at the $16 an hour as well? 'Cause I know there's different price options.
That's the recommendation, sir.
Other discussion?
What is it looking like because everything concerning salary increases? I mean, I think about what McDonald's and what our fast food companies are doing now. So I guess one concern is how much, but we're still saying that the cost would be split. But how far can that number go?
Can only go up, as you will recall, at $20.
Right.
I think the tipping point is somewhere around $19.50. But again, you know, I think your decision really needs to be,
These long-term, long-range with unions.
and that's the issue of how much gamble do you want to take on when will you eliminate having any bidders, and how much gamble do you want to take regarding unionization? Because I will tell you that from a financial standpoint, it's for all practical purposes the same. Remember Mr. Warden's comment or his question. That $164,000 is split equal, and then the $66,000 is split equally. That's why I say this is not an easy conversation.
Well, I like the fact that we'll be in charge of the program. I like the fact that we'd be in charge of the program. That's what I like about it more, really the financial decision. We'll be able to control the service and how it operates and everything, and we'll be able to dictate that as years go on, instead of being in the hands of someone else, where in a couple of years we put out for bid again, and if they're the only ones again, they're still in charge, or they can change things on us. That's what I like about it personally.
Very good point.
We did the similar thing with our sanitation department, did we not?
Commercial.
with commercial.
Meant commercial, yeah.
Yes. And Mr. Thomas is certainly correct. We did not do a good job because we had never been in it. I will tell you, it's a little different in that we have been very much immersed in the transit system. The only thing we're not running, as Anthony showed you, is the employee side. Everything else, but that doesn't mean these projections are perfect, not by any means.
And to Logan's point, we do have additional control, but we do have additional liability. I mean, there are
But we
our
are taking some of
employees,
it.
there are employees, I mean, transit, those employees, they're employed by someone else, so there's a,
But if we're offering the service, we still have the liability regardless of whether they're actually our employees or not. Is that not correct, Mr. Carter?
one,
I didn't plant that question. But that statute about authorities that I told you, I looked at it today, and there is no case law in North Carolina. That was originally passed in 1975. But there was an opinion from the Attorney General that basically said the following. It says, while a public transportation authority created pursuant to this article has rights granted to it as a body corporate and politic, such an authority remains in the context of the article an agency of the municipality which created it, period. Such an agency relationship between the authority and the creating municipality would subject the municipality to liability arising out of contracts and torts of the authority. One of the things, when we called the league on the buses, you were told last time buses were insured, and what we believed, that was all insured. But of course, the league said, you know, how many of you could go out and get a car today, and I want to insure that car, but I don't want to insure any drivers? Well, there's nobody going to give you insurance there because somebody's going to be driving that car. Same thing with those buses. They said they had to have coverage there. So that aspect is already built in. That's been there, even though we didn't know that the drivers had duplicate coverage. That is first transit coverage and liability coverage from us. The addition would be through the workers' comp. That's one thing that we would be taking on you and the figure that Anthony gave you there. But again, there is a possibility that based upon that opinion, and that goes back to 1984, and again, there's been no case law in this area, but that their liability, even if there was an authority. But to Mr. Thomas's point, the contract certainly has provisions in it with First Transit that would say you take on the liability, and that has been the case. There have been bus accidents. There have been people that have been hurt on the buses, and First Transit's insurance has taken care of all that. And our folks, even though we had coverage and didn't even know about it, but they never had to step up and take care of it. So you're correct.
I think my thought was more about employee liability, as far as, you know,
Yes.
our employees can sue us,
Yes, sir.
and their employees can't sue us, per se.
They're independent contractors. Yes, sir.
Are we assuming any employee liability other than what's unique to a transportation system? I don't think so. For employee?
No, sir, we're being, you know, when you take them in as your employees, you have the workman's comp issues.
Yeah.
You always have issues where employees sue us. We've been
For
sued several times, and, you know, EEOC complaints, et cetera, that kind of.
Employee negligence or whatever,
Yeah,
sure.
and so forth. In fact, and this came from Ms. Marshman, sorry, but in Charlotte right now, the employees of the bus system are saying that the authority is not taking enough precautions to protect them during the COVID crisis. And we're picketing, et cetera, and so forth. So there's all kind of issues, but there could be certainly are issues when you've got employees. There's no question about that.
If I remember in this correctly or not, we have, in the discussion on a previous meeting, we were talking about some of the management positions at First Transit that we were covering that probably would be negotiable or what's the word you use? Superfluous, not necessarily superfluous, that could be eliminated.
I made a statement that I felt that they had a top-heavy management. And I'm not sure that's the reason why they cut $26,000 out of their $1.3 million proposal. But, you know.
Is there any stipulation in the contract with First Transit that if we were to sever ties with them, that we could not use their employees for a certain period of time?
Not at the,
Okay.
not at the expiration of the contract. Now, if there's anything that happens prior to that, if the council were to, then that would certainly be up to First Transit. But again, First Transit's been telling you, at least, and Anthony, that they're losing money each month. So there may be negotiations, if you took it in-house, that it could be done quicker than July 1. But presently, you have a contract with them as a city, and employees are obligated to them through June 30th of this year.
Then we could turn around and rehire them, right? as
If
city
they wanted to come
employees.
work for us and were willing to take the conditions of employment, yes, sir.
And they, speaking to them, they are a very honorable company, and they've been a good partner. So being very candid with them and saying, it's hard to say which direction this is going to go, they're willing to support us in either direction that we choose. So they're going to fulfill their obligations if we decide to go in-house, and they will certainly continue to be good partners if we continue to do business.
Let me also make one other statement. This is, I know normally in this particular meeting, the first of the month, we do not have public comment. If you're going to have a meeting tonight, I know that there are drivers here. By our rules, you can vote and they would have no voice. You may decide that you want to either allow them to at least give you a couple of minutes of their thoughts, or allow them, or push this off until the 22nd when they would have public comment. Again, as a manager, I'm not pressing you to make a decision tonight. We do need a decision in the near future.
Anything by waiting a couple of weeks? I don't think so.
I don't, other than the fact that I'm going to get more gray hair, other than that, Mr. Bittner, I'm not sure you're going to gain anything.
There's a motion and a second on the floor.
Right.
So we're going to go ahead.
One thing I see by bringing in that group from, for First, any of the employees from First Transit, we won't miss a beat kind of in terms of moving forward either. So that would be a great thing as well. So
One thing to point out as well is that many of our employees, I say ours, but many of the transit drivers have been with us for a good long while, and they're heavily invested in the system.
And I'm sure
I felt
some
like
of
I had to say that because some of them are here tonight.
Some of them with the previous vendor also.
Some of them were with NV, in fact, and then went with First Transit. And of course, they're eager to see what's going to happen, but the amount of time that you need to take is what it is.
But you're even looking at the management as well now. Well, before, did you have that? Because we didn't actually bring anything in-house, we just had the drivers before, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, sir?
Before, when we kept drivers but no management in place, when we switched from the other company?
It was basically the same exact arrangement, just a different company.
Okay.
They provided the management, they provided the drivers. And in many cases, I don't recall how many didn't make the transition, but a majority of them did.
All right, call the vote. All those in favor of the motion,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands. Aye. So it's 4-3, okay, or 4-2. Motion carries. Staying in-house with that. Thank you for the presentation.
Take a 15-minute break and then
That'd be
come back
nice.
for recycling.
Yes, sir. Get a
Okay.
chance to stretch our legs a little bit. We'll stand adjourned or recess for a few minutes. 15. All right, council, we're back in session, and we're going to move on to the recycling. Dr. Woodruff will be presenting this item.
You will pull up the recycling slide, please. I can promise you that after the presentation on recycling, you will feel much better than the difficult decision you just had. So let's go to that. You saw this before. For 10 years, we had a contract with Sunoco. There was no cost to the city, no cost to the customer. We know that in 2022, we signed a new contract, and that was based on $95 a ton, going up each year by $5 to $115 a ton. And at that time, we implemented fees to the customers. We assume, based upon history, 2,500 tons. That's from residential, small business, and commercial. So in FY '22, at $95 a ton, we had to budget $158,000. Now remember, that was not for a full year. If you'll remember, the contract started November 1st. So $95 a ton for those months. So that meant July, August, September, October. And yes, I did count on my fingers in public. That meant it was an 8-month contract. We're now into 12-month contracts coming up. And you can see what the fee will be, 100, 105, 110, 115,000. When you look at the budget for FY '26, which is the one that will begin July 1, 2025, you will need to have $287,500 of money in your budget to cover the tonnage. I want to remind you, in implementing the fee, the contract is a cost per ton. It also, when we talked to you last year at this time, we're looking at the FY '22 budget, we were saying the fees that we're looking at cover the tonnage, it covers the equipment and maintenance, it covers any reduction in subsidy, and it covers all of the increase through FY '27. You may remember this. One of the options we reviewed with you was to go ahead and implement the fee in FY '22 that would cover all of the cost increases up to $115 a ton and those other equipment costs. At that time, one of the options was a $4 increase. This is what you actually adopted. You said, we're going to adopt the contract, going from $95 to $115. But you also said, we're not going to move to $4. What you adopted was $2 per month residential, $2 per month small business, and 30 cents a tip for commercial. And you said you will revisit these in the future, recognizing that these fees did not cover all the cost, but also recognizing you did not want to impact your customers that substantially. You can see the tonnage. Remember, it was an 8-month contract. We're now going to a 12-month contract. But let me share with you a reminder of the assumption. Because we had not been in this situation before, we assumed that the product would be worthless. So what you budgeted was $158,000, assuming, again, nothing for the product. Why do we do that? We believe, and your philosophy has always been, fiscal conservativity. However you pronounce that, being physically conservative. You knew there was no guarantee on the value of the product. You know that historically the product value's been low. And you also knew that because you subsidize sanitation, that if there is a savings, that saving goes where? Back into your savings account called the fund balance. I want to show you the commodity trends. The most important line to look at is the solid blue line that goes from left to right. That's basically zero, meaning that you got nothing for it. I want you to notice how many of the lines stay under that blue line consistently. I also want you to notice on the far right side, there are only 3 lines that are above the break even. So when you made the decision as a policy that you would assume no money coming from the product, that was a very wise decision. These were the fees you approved. The budget was roughly $19,791 per month. So in a 3-month period, and that's now November, December, January, the first 3 months of the new, how have you fared? You should have paid Sunoco $59,373. But keep reading. Amazingly enough, the products have completely offset your cost. In 1 month, you had to pay Sunoco not $19,791, you paid them $39.39. And in 1 month, the product had enough value to fully offset the $19,000 a month, and the city actually got a check for $1,317.60. So in the first 3 months, which that's not a forecast of what's going to happen, but for the first 3 months, you've actually had a budgetary savings of over $58,000. That's not a guarantee about anything. Moving forward, we have no idea. The commodity market has been the best in the last 3 months, even with everything that's going on with the national and international economy. We're very pleased with these numbers. On the other hand, we can't guarantee that those numbers are to continue. So I think it's important for you to assume that every month you're going to be paying, not getting. The product value has fully offset the cost. And again, for the next 5 months, we're assuming that you are going to be paying. With all of that said, let's get to the bottom line. The draft recycling budget for FY23 assumes, and let me go back one, for tonnage, $100 a ton, 2,500 tons, assumes $250,000. We know that equipment and maintenance, we will be buying trucks and maintaining them, another $250,000. And for the personnel that just operate the recycling, we have 3 recycling routes. We have 3 people per route or per team, so you have 9 employees. So you're looking at $825,000 for just the recycling budget. Now, your current fees are actually producing $315,000. Remember, this year in FY22, your cost potentially was $158,000. And in FY23, your cost potential is $250,000. I can see Mr. Thomas is already smiling because he knows the punchline here. Bottom line is, there's no need to increase your fees for recycling this year. There will come a point, most likely in FY24, because remember, your current fees are $315,000. Every year, that amount you potentially have to pay is going to go up. Bottom line recommendations are this: keep your residential, no charge. Keep your small business, no charge, that was the wrong word. Residential at $2 per month, no change. Small business, $2 a month, no change. Commercial, 30 cents a tip, no change. Recycling bins go up $5 per month. Now this says equals $5 per month. That should say that the increase goes up $5 a month. Our recycling containers that we issue, we rent them. The cost of an 8 cubic yard recycling dumpster has gone from about $72 to over $130. Even at these rates that you will see in the rate schedule that you'll eventually have to adopt as part of the budget, a $10 a month increase for every size, we are still below what the other competitors have. And then If you agree with these numbers, your general fund subsidy is going to be about $510,000. And that's about, where it has been. So let me go back real quickly. I'm going to show you again, current fees, general fund subsidy, total budget, and that's just for the recycling side of your sanitation. That's not your full sanitation budget. So here are my recommendations. At some point in the very near future, we'd like for you to say, yes, you agree with those, or no, you want to do something else. You do not have to make that decision tonight. Any questions on where you are? I hope you feel like you're in a good financial position on this one.
Sounds good.
Questions?
Good news.
Okay. We've been through transit. Would you please now pull up the before and after school recreation fees? Okay. Susan and her staff, I think, do an outstanding job of providing assistance to parents. Susan, why don't you come on up to the microphone if you don't mind? The purpose of our before and after school program is very important. Provide a safe environment, assist working parents with student care, offer education and recreation programs for students at a reasonable cost. Who are our clients? Well, the programs are offered to all city residents, and then after the city residents, to non-city residents. And I believe, I didn't check this one with you, it is grades 1 through 8?
Includes kindergarten as well.
It includes kindergarten, okay. The locations, it's the Onslow County schools that are inside the city, the Commons Gym, the Youth Center, and sometimes other city facilities based upon availability. Bottom line, though, is our programs are predominantly run out of schools. And one of the great things about that is, for example, at Carolina Forest Elementary School, it's the only before-school program. A parent gets the child there, we take care of them for a period of time, then they go to school. After school, they stay right there in the same location, we take care of them, their parents come and get them. We also have Newbridge Middle School. We have 7 elementary schools for after school, 1 elementary school before school, and then we have Newbridge School. And currently, what Susan and the staff are doing are picking those folks up and transporting them to the Commons. Pre-COVID, we had about 3,200 students a year. Now, that's pick any number you want, then multiply it by 300. So it's not that you have 3,250 people every day. It's you have roughly 250 or so, and you have them day after day after day. During the COVID, that dropped not significantly because many parents still worked. And our projection is now that COVID is beginning to be part of our society, not being solved, but part of our society, we think your yearly is going to be back over 3,000. The City Council policy. In FY17, the City Council, and I believe that would have meant that, Mr. Jackson, you would not have been part of this policy. I believe you were elected in 18?
It came in December 17th.
Okay. And Mr. Sosa, obviously you would not have been. But the council at that time, and remember, policies are only good for the time that they're there. They're not laws. The programs are to be self-funded for all direct costs. Direct costs are shown. Indirect costs are things like buildings and utilities. So the fees that we have traditionally had are designed to cover the direct cost only. Before school, the current city fee is $30 per month and $60 per month non-resident. I will tell you, $30 a month. Okay. After school, $75 per month and $150, because your policy has been in the past, city residents, because the taxpayer pays for all of the gyms and other things, non-city residents, okay. What's the issue? The issue is part-time employment and hourly wages. We run the program with 6 program assistants and 10 rec aides. They're currently paid $12.50 and $10. And Susan, how many times in the last year have you had every one of those positions filled?
Not many. That's including the challenge of getting people to the table to even apply. So we've had quite a bit of turnover. Very fortunate that in 2020 you authorized those folks to come on city, but filling them has still been a challenge, as with everybody else in the market.
And the turnover rate has been significant. You know, one of the important things in anything we do is consistency. John always tells me that the most important word in management is consistency. When you take your child to a before-after-school program, and one day it's this person and the next day it's somebody else, that's just not a good idea. What's the solution? Well, first of all, there is no solution to the part-time employment. We can't make these people city employees 8 hours a day because we don't need them 8 hours a day. But in order to cut down the turnover, I think we have to address the wage. In addressing the wages, go back to your policy that the program is supposed to pay for itself. In order to change the wages from $12.50 to $14.50 and from 10 to 13, it means what? A higher expense, going to have higher revenue. Where does the revenue come from? The policy says it's supposed to come from the people who use the program, not from the taxpayer. So what we're recommending is that before school goes from $30 to $45 a month, and non-city from $60 to $75. Now, I recognize that's not the normal doubling. The last time you had a fee increase was 2017. I can tell you, in checking with the other programs, these fees are very reasonable programs. After school, we're recommending 75 go to 95 a month, and 150 goes to 175 per month. And again, the last fee was 2017. Assume it's 1 month, and again, we're talking about the new fee. So this is after school. Remember, the after-school program, the after-school program was 75, it's going to 95 if you approve it. Assume 1 month is 20 days, 2 hours, or 40, 20 times 2 hours is 40. If you divide $75 a month by 40 hours, currently it's $1.87 an hour for having your child taken care of. At $95, it does go up 51 cents an hour. For non-city residents, you see it goes up also. So the recommendation is that before school, it goes from 30 to 45 for in-city and up to 75 for non. The after-school program goes up to 95 and 175. That you would implement these fees and wage adjustments with the start of fall school. That would be August. So again, you do not have to address this evening, but as we are getting ready, I spent the entire weekend studying all of the detailed budgets that Mr. Thomas enjoys looking at. And today I spent the entire day meeting with departments, and we'll do that again tomorrow and Thursday. We are very close to bringing to you the detailed budgets. What we're trying to do in these sessions is to cover some of the longer discussion items like this. So this is going to be the recommendation at some point that we're going to ask you to take. Now, if tonight you feel comfortable saying we're not in favor of any of this change, let's leave it like it is. Or if you're in favor of these changes, we'll go ahead and build them in the budget. But at some point, we're going to ask you to make this decision on these fee changes. Any questions that you may have?
Sure. So did you do these calculations so that it was, this is what it equals? You said if we do this increase, in wages, then this is what we need, increase in
correct.
revenue.
That's correct.
Did you
These
do
numbers,
any factoring of price demand that you would lose some, that you would take into account, or did you go strictly?
we have a waiting list.
Oh, okay.
You will lose some. I will also say to you, though, if you move from these programs anywhere else, you're going to have sticker shock.
Right. Oh, I understand that.
There will be, when I say sticker shock, I'm not talking about sticker shock of staying with us. I'm talking about the sticker shock you're going to have to pay some others. Now, in fairness, the Boys and Girls Club does have lower fees in a modest way, but remember, they have grants. And let's talk about grants a second. We also have, very fortunate over the years, that we've had the River of Life Church. Mayor, I don't remember the actual number, but you received a check on behalf of the council just a couple of months ago. That money is specifically set aside for grants to help people in the before and after school program or in other sports programs that Susan and you sponsor. So, yes, it's going to be an impact. Some people will feel the impact is just, some people will not. But this does cover the cost of the wage increases.
Additional grants?
No, sir, not for this program.
Is it possible that we could?
I don't think it is, and I'll be quite frank with you. There are very few grants available for this type of a program. Now, if you talk to your church and a lot of the other churches in town and ask them to think about the fact that they get city services without paying property tax, and they would like to make a contribution to help offset this, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, because my concern with this is that, you know, it might not seem like a big increase for just the average person, but if you're a young mother that's a widower and you got 2 or 3 kids in this program that lost her job during COVID and trying to get back on her feet, that could be a whole lot, because we don't have a graduated, you pay the same for every child.
Correct.
We do have a couple of options for folks. We do actually offer financial assistance for city residents. If they provide the need, we can look at that and offer that. We also offer a third child discount. So there's a couple of opportunities for folks to, if they're a city resident, to take advantage of that. And we certainly will keep that in mind and make all of our patrons aware. Currently, we don't have a lot that participate in the after-school program with financial aid, but we still certainly offer it.
Look forward to the decision in the future on this.
So I assume this would be included in the proposed fee schedule when it comes time to do that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, I was actually going to make a motion to approve it. I'm sorry? I was going to make a motion to approve it, because my son is in the program, and he loves it. He loves Mr. Xavier, and it's a fantastic, and for the price, we've looked at it before we put him in this. You can't touch this. I mean, it's just, and he loves it. He doesn't even like to get picked up by us when we go get him, because he's having so much fun over there, and he's made a lot of good friends. So I think it's a great system that you'll have. I mean, and I think the price is extremely fair, and he enjoys it greatly.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I'll put a second on that.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
I'm not ready to make a decision on this one.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Carter, I think that was it for tonight. I think you've got some information to pass along to the council regarding the election schedule.
Yes, I do. If you watch the news, the United States Supreme Court yesterday turned down the legislature's appeal of the U.S. congressional districts that the judge and the panel of judges imposed, and that was accepted by the North Carolina Supreme Court. So, having said all that, it looks like we're going to have an election. And the filing period has ended, and the election is set for May the 17th. So staff has begun thinking about what about the swearing in. If the election's on the 17th, that's a Tuesday, you would not have a meeting that night, but it would rather be on the Wednesday, May the 18th. Hopefully by May the 18th, you will have adopted your budget or will adopt it on May the 18th, would be the plans. from the 17th until your next meeting, June the 7th, is actually 3 weeks. The concept would be, if you believe there's an adequate time, that on June the 7th, the council members who have been elected would be sworn in. That gives 3 weeks. My question was going to be, is that adequate time for those of you who've been through to get those folks invited? Because the concept again would be that the June 7th would be a swearing-in ceremony exclusively with a reception, no business and so forth. Now, there'll probably be a second meeting in June because it's one that's scheduled, but normally in July, the first meeting has already been off the books. And sometimes y'all, at least for the last year or so, have done away with the second meeting in July. So again, it's important, I think, to consider getting the council back on June the 20th, wherever the second meeting in June is, and so forth. But again, does that sound reasonable to have the swearing in to be on the 7th? And
What does state election law require?
there's
Doesn't
no
specify.
requirement as far as a period of time. It could be on the second meeting in June if you wanted to do that.
The 7th of June is a workshop.
But the concept, Mayor, would be to do away with the workshop. You've already adopted your budget, theoretically. That's what we're hoping you'll have done. And that will be solely a swearing-in meeting and so forth. Because I know y'all like to visit with your folks who supported you during the campaign and so forth, and so forth. And then we could have a workshop and whatever agenda items that need to be addressed at the second meeting in June.
Is everybody good with that?
Fine with me.
Just wanted to give you plenty of, make sure you're comfortable with the time to, if you, so forth. Okay, well, we'll continue to work in that direction. Did we have a one city moment?
We have a one city moment, then I have one other matter. Amy, would you please come up? Wherever you would like to stand.
Okay. All right, so on Monday, we had an award ceremony at the beginning of our officers' meeting, and we recognized our firefighter of the year, our officer of the year, and a meritorious unit citation. Our firefighter of the year was Logan Ruda. She's a firefighter too with us at the fire department. She was recognized for her dedication, her positive attitude, her hard work. She came in with no certifications. Since then, she's gotten her firefighter, she's gotten her EMT, she's working on technical rescue, and also her fire inspector. So she's definitely going to be one of our up-and-coming leaders in the department. Next, we have Jimmy Davis. He's a second-time recipient of this award. He has 25 years with the department. He's very dedicated to the department, to the personnel that serve under him. He's a mentor, and he helps develop personnel to enter into the engineer role and also lieutenant and captain. He's also an advocate in the community. He helps with all the Christmas programs. He helped kind of disperse the Christmas Angels, where a lot of the crews participated this year to help out people in the community. He was also recognized for, on a particular call, he walked a homeless person to McDonald's, bought them dinner, and then bought enough gift cards to make sure that he would be able to eat for the rest of that week. So he has a heart of gold, and he's definitely deserving of this award. And then last but not least, we have a large group here, and they received the meritorious unit citation for a call on West Francis Street in September. The members were Battalion Chief Kevin Davis, Assistant Battalion Chief Sean Kistner, Captain Brandy Bruns, Lieutenant Chris Gandy, Lieutenant Roger Parker, Firefighter 2 Kevin Hollowell, Firefighter 2 Logan Ruda, and Firefighter 1 Benjamin Yeager. They responded to someone who was having difficulty breathing. They got there, they knew right away that they were going to need more resources in order to be able to help the patient and get him out of his dwelling. And we actually, you can't really see it on the picture, but we had to cut the front of the house in order to extricate him from his residence. So it was a very involved incident, and this group is definitely deserving of the award as well. So we're proud of these people, we're proud of the crews, we're proud of everyone that works at the fire department, and we're happy to serve the citizens.
Well done.
Thank you.
Wait, doesn't it?
You know, the interesting thing about that is that's the second time we've had to cut that same person out of the house. Very large person. For more than 52 years, Gwen and I have experienced For more than 52 years, Gwen and I have experienced life's journeys together. During that time, we have been blessed with 3 amazing and successful sons, their wonderful wives, 6 fabulous grandchildren. We've lived in Florida and now in North Carolina. We've been blessed to travel in Europe and Asia for the past 11 years. It's been my honor and privilege to be your manager. I apologize. Under your leadership, much has been accomplished, yet much is still to be done. The city is fortunate that they have 560-plus dedicated and professional staff. They believe in ethics above all else, service to others before self, and quality in all that they do. And they're all committed to TNT, today, not tomorrow. With that said, it is now time for Gwen and me to continue our life experience. My last day with you will be May 23rd, so we can get the budget adopted. In closing, I want to thank you for the fact you're committed to the council manager form of government. You've always placed the needs of the many over the few and the powerful. I thank you for being people of honor and integrity. May the wind always be at your back and your seas calm. Thank you.
Sure. It's unexpected to everybody to hear this tonight, but Dr. Woodruff, still got you for a couple months, okay? So we're glad of that. As a council, I think I speak on behalf of the council that you have done a tremendous job as the manager of this city. Right now, I can't even put into words, my feelings as far as, what I've seen happen under your watch here. I know that you credit the council with a lot of the direction and guidance, but without you at the helm as the manager, there's not much of this would have ever got done. And that we can be very thankful to you as the manager, city manager of Jacksonville, North Carolina. And like I said, we still got you for 2 months, so we still expect great things.
Hope you get to the next question.
Yes, I'm sure you'll get us there. Council, I'm going to ask the clerk to put a closed session on the agenda for the March 22nd meeting to discuss the path or process in which we're going to head now as far as naming an interim manager after Dr. Woodruff leaves the 22nd of May, and also look at what process we'll use in determining who the next city manager of Jacksonville will be. But until that time, Dr. Richard Woodruff is the city manager of the city of Jacksonville, and I think we're still in good hands with good leadership. And again, thank you. And at some point in time, I will have the words that I need to say. Yes, sir. All right. So we will, this time, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?